Watch this video before you go and hire a ghostwriter. So if you want to produce content for LinkedIn or X, but you don't have time and you're thinking about going and outsourcing it to an agency or a freelancer or even hiring someone in-house to do this, watch this video. I want to show you what to look for when you're hiring someone and also share some of the characteristics of the most successful client relationships that we've had at Compound. Because there are some common threads in the clients that we've worked with that have led to outsized results and just overall better experiences for everyone involved. So first thing to think about is the time commitment. So one of the common angles that agencies will use to sell ghostwriting or just social and content in general is that you're going to save a ton of time. You're a busy startup founder. You don't have the time in your schedule to go and create content for LinkedIn, X, or any of the other platforms you're on, much less do it well. And that is true. That's a valid angle. We use that to sell our services. But what often gets miscommunicated with this pitch is that it doesn't mean that it's going to require no time on the client's end to build a successful social-led content engine, but it means that it's going to require much less time than if they were going to do it themselves. The easiest way to explain this is if you're going to do your own content and write everything from scratch, it might take you 20 hours a week. That's not unrealistic. But if you're going to go and hire someone, it might take you a time commitment of 1 hour, maybe 2, depending on how much feedback and edits they need. So if we look at the math, 1 to 2 hours is much less than 20 hours a week, but it's still more than 0. It's still a time commitment, and it's very much a two-way street. So if you're thinking about outsourcing this to someone, think about how much time and effort you want to put into collaborating with this person. In my experience, and this might not be a popular opinion, the best relationships I've had with clients are where they are collaborative. We're able to do what we do best, and they're excited to give us ideas and give us feedback on stuff and just work together to make this thing work. And it still saves them a ton of time. And this leads me into my next point, which is it is a two-way street. This is sort of a build off of the time commitment part. Again, if you're expecting to just outsource this and not touch it ever, it could work and you're going to get content that goes out. But usually what happens when clients want to do this, and I've learned this the hard way, is we get a client, they come in and the founder is like, we know content's important, but I just don't like it. I don't want to be involved. I'm too busy. And the point of contact ends up being like a marketing director or a content marketer. And everything that we write for the founder's personal brand goes through that point of contact. And it's not that that can't work. I have examples of that working as well. But what happens oftentimes in that scenario is that the content gets written based on the information that we have. And objectively, it's good content. But then it gets sent off to the founder. And the founder's like, that's not my tone of voice. And they might not inherently be wrong, but because there's that gap in communication, it makes it a lot more difficult. And this is especially true when it comes to creating content for a personal brand. So if you're considering working with a ghostwriter or someone to create content for your personal brand, you should be ready to collaborate with them at least somewhat regularly. It doesn't need to be, again, a 10, 20 hour a week commitment, but you should be willing to give feedback and specific feedback on batches. If you're not prepared to do that, you might not be in a spot where hiring a ghostwriter makes a ton of sense. The inverse to that, though, is the ghostwriter should be actively seeking out your opinions and your takes on things that they're writing for you. So one of the common pitfalls that ghostwriters will fall into and why ghostwriting as a term gets sort of a bastardized name nowadays is that what they'll often do is take these generic business concepts or generic, even industry concepts from within a specific niche and turn them into content pieces. And on paper, it works, but it doesn't align with the founder's actual opinions. And it's usually pretty easy to tell that this is coming from someone else. And the founder is usually not stoked because they're like, I actually don't believe the point that this LinkedIn post is trying to make. So if you're working with a ghostwriter, there should be regular communication between the writer and whoever they're writing for. So with us, what that usually looks like, and actually I filmed a whole video on this, so I'll link it up here. But in short, we do content interviews every 2 weeks with clients. And that way we make sure that the majority of the source material that we're pulling from to create social content is straight up from a transcript that came from an interview with the founders. So everything that makes it onto their profiles is something that they are explicitly telling us. And every time we run into an issue, It's usually because we weren't able to secure that regular content interview with a founder. Now it's like a criteria in our qualifying process, but having that touch point is so, so important. So if you're looking to hire a ghostwriter, make sure there's at least a bi-weekly touch point in like the form of a content interview where the writer is asking you for your opinions, takes, and source material for content. Also, real quick, if you're enjoying this, drop a like down below. I'm new here on YouTube, so any like, comment helps the algorithm. And if you're enjoying this content around B2B social strategy, subscribe because I'm posting videos like this every week. Now, while it's true that every single post that comes out from your account should either be a verbatim take from your mouth that was said during a content interview or a podcast or a blog of yours or something like that, you are going to have to give up some degree of control. So if you're considering hiring a writer or a content agency to help you with your personal brand, and you're not going to be the one that's writing the content, you do have to be okay with giving up a little bit of control. Again, this is sort of similar to the time commitment piece that we mentioned earlier. So you're going to have control over edits and giving feedback, or at least you should. If a writer or an agency is not allowing you to give feedback, major red flag. But you also have to understand that the content that's going to go out, if it wasn't written by you, there's likely going to be some little thing here or there that doesn't align with exactly how you would write something. And this is more from a stylistic point of view. The arguments or the facts or the takes that are presented should 100% align with you. I'm speaking more in terms of the writing style. There's always going to be a little bit that might be slightly off. One thing that will make the engagement working with a content agency or a ghostwriter way easier for everyone involved is just to acknowledge that as part of the process. And this is very different from quality control standards. So quality control standards should be airtight. Your agency or your writer should have these in place already. Like, I'm a little bit obsessive over quality control, but writing style is subjective. And there might be ways that you would reword something or say something different, and you can make these edits. But at a certain point, if you're redlining every line of copy that you get sent over from a writer for your social profiles, that's going to end up being a hindrance in the process, because it's going to delay the time to ship. And compressing that time to ship is one of the best ways to get more content out there, get more data points, and iterate faster. So it could be the difference between making 2 posts in a week and making 7 in a week. You're going to gain a lot more insight posting those 7 posts, even if there's like a line or two that doesn't quite align with exactly how you'd write something. It's still a net positive over being overly scrutinizing of that one specific piece of the copy that really is pretty inconsequential. So it's a tough balance, because I get it. I'm the same way. I want to have that impeccable quality, but there's a difference between being mindful of quality and just kind of having skewed expectations of reality. And then there's a few other things that I would consider when you're vetting an agency or a ghostwriter is ask how many clients they're handling, or ask how many clients the writer on your account is going to be handling. If it's more than about 4, I would be concerned. In my experience, 4 is about the point where it's like you're at capacity, but you're not stretched thin. Like, at my max, I could probably handle 6 clients, like writing and producing content on my own. That would be pretty aggressive. And speaking from experience of doing that at some point last year, I would not recommend it. And I would not recommend working with the writer who's trying to swing that, because it's going to come back and bite them in the ass at some point. So I would recommend working with someone. If you're working with a freelancer, 4 clients is about the sweet spot. And if you're working with an agency, the writer that's assigned to your account, again, same thing, about 4 accounts. It's going to depend a little bit depending on the deliverables. And then with the agency piece in particular, one mistake I made early on when I was selling deals, when it was just me and some freelancers, or even shortly after I hired my first team member, was I would lean really heavily on the fact that, hey, if you hire us, you're going to get me specifically. And that's fine. But honestly, if you're working with an agency, there's absolutely nothing wrong with having a dedicated copywriter on your account who's not the founder. The biggest thing is that you're able to communicate with them. Where you get into issues with this is if the founder's selling you, and then on the back end, it's like 3 copywriters in a trench coat. The founder's selling you, and then the copywriter that's on your account is like, you can't talk to them. There's no line of communication there. They don't really understand your tone of voice. You're like lacking clarity on like who's actually writing my content. Make sure that you can actively speak to and communicate with the writer on your account, whether it's the founder of the agency, a freelancer, or if it is an employee of an agency. You'll also want to consider industry experience when selecting a content agency or a ghostwriter. So with us, we specialize in B2B SaaS, and specifically, most of our expertise is e-com infrastructure, fintech, very specific niches. And I've been operating in those niches well before I went off my own with the agency. So I have a very deep understanding of the subject matter, the influencers, the topics that are relevant and compelling. And that makes it a lot easier to, one, ramp up clients at a faster rate versus having a super long, drawn out onboarding sequence. And then also being able to create higher level content that is really deep and being able to better integrate the points and the takes made in the content interview, like we talked about earlier, into the content that actually makes it out onto the timeline. So not having specific industry experience isn't a deal breaker, but it is something to ask about. And if they have it, it's definitely a plus. So that should clear up a lot when it comes to selecting a ghostwriter or a content agency. Let me know if you have any questions in the comments below. And I'm going to drop another video up on the screen right now with our full system. So if you want to know how we actually do this with our clients and just steal the system for yourself, watch that video, check it out, and I will see you over there.